Well, at least it wasn't the Emoji Movie. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm going to review the newest adaptation of a Stephen King novel, The Dark Tower. So The Dark Tower features Idris Elba as well as Matthew McConaughey. And basically the story's pretty simple in this one. So what you have going on is there's this big tower that holds the whole universe together. And Matthew McConaughey's character is trying to destroy the universe. And so basically the small boy who you see is, the whole movie's focused around this small boy. And he has the ability to destroy the tower. Now obviously he doesn't want to do that because destroying the tower would destroy Earth as well as all these other realms that exist. And Idris Elba is a gunslinger who is a protector of the tower and is trying to defeat Matthew McConaughey's character. So basically the conflict is Matthew McConaughey's trying to get the boy to destroy the tower and Idris Elba's trying to protect the boy and kill Matthew McConaughey. Now saying the story is pretty simple is one thing, but they do throw in a lot of really weird, I'm not going to say convoluted, but just unnecessary terminology and fantasy aspects to this movie that they just didn't work. They didn't feel natural in this world. Now you have other films like, I'm going to say Lord of the Rings and some other, high fantasy movies where they say these things like seers and sorcerers and things like that just, it makes more sense in those kind of movies, but in this movie it just seemed really weird. It seemed really out of place. It seemed like they were just throwing in fantasy terms to make it a fantasy movie, and it felt weird. It felt very clunky when they would say these things. Now I'm sure in the book it lands much better. I know Stephen King's an excellent writer, and some of his movies that have been created from his works are fantastic movies, like The Shining, both really good, and this one, it just felt clunky. It felt like maybe, I didn't read the books, but maybe Stephen King isn't the best fantasy writer. He just should stick with thriller and things like that, and it felt awkward. Like towards the beginning of the film, they're throwing out all this terminology, and it's fine, it's working for me. But then as it gets further along, I get more and more just sick of them saying these things. Like the main character, the boy, he has this thing called the Shine. And his Shine is like his spirit, and it's what's used to destroy the tower. Little children have it. Specifically, he has it very strongly, and that is what Matthew McConaughey wants. He wants his Shine. And I just felt like that was just, I don't know. It just sounded kind of dumb to me. I don't know. It just didn't work for me at all. It felt like they took a lot of elements from other fantasy movies and just threw them in this amalgamation of a movie, and it fell really flat, and it didn't feel original. It didn't feel even authentic or interesting for the most part. That being said, in the beginning of the movie, I was kind of invested in this world. I thought it was kind of cool. You didn't know what was going on, a lot of mystery around it. And as the movie progressed and the mystery kind of, I'm not going to say fell apart, it just grew old. I didn't care about what was going on anymore, and I didn't care about any of the worlds that existed. And while the lore in the world seemed kind of interesting to me, it didn't look particularly good. This movie doesn't look great for being a fantasy movie. You really need to put money in to a fantasy movie, which can help save it. While Valerian's not a great movie, they put a ton of money in that movie, and it showed. It looks gorgeous, and that's one of the best things about that movie. But this movie doesn't look good. I just looked up the budget because I really wanted to know, and it only cost $60 million, and while that does seem like a lot of money, for a movie like this, that's not that much money. And it really shows, especially towards the third act, with the CG that's used. It looks very non-fluid. It looks like almost like sci-fi channel quality, which is weird because up until the fights towards the end of the movie, it didn't look terrible. There was a moment where this demon creature comes out, and that didn't look that great, but it looked really bad when you got towards the end of the movie. People were like doing that Matrix-y stuff, and it just looked, the character models just didn't look good. It didn't look like a quality CG rendering of a person. Also, the action wasn't that great for me. While the trailer showed a lot of this like gunplay action, and there is that in the movie, but it doesn't have that cool quality to it that you would see in other movies, especially movies that have come out recently. I mean, look at John Wick. I mean, that's amazing gunplay. Like you cannot get better than that. And this movie just felt so like not great because of its lack. I mean, one of your main characters is the gunslinger. And it just, like, it wasn't that cool. Like, it had a novelty to it that he has revolvers and stuff, but it just didn't look that cool, and it didn't seem very interesting to me. The acting in the movie wasn't exactly terrible, but it wasn't great. The lines and the dialogue were kind of, like, they didn't feel great. They felt very flat, which is weird, because Stephen King, is a great writer. Maybe it's just the adaptation, the screenplay from his writing is what made this seem really flat. It felt very awkward coming out of their mouths. Matthew McConaughey specifically just plays this like charming devil type character. He's a sorcerer. He's the man in black. He's a sorcerer. But he's basically just the devil. I mean, I don't know what his motivation is. It never really tells you. It just says that he wants to unleash this darkness over the whole universe. Why he wants to do that, I don't know. He just wants chaos. There's no reason for it. It doesn't have any character development for him. He's just a bad guy who wants bad things to happen. Same thing with Idris Elba. They go into his backstory, just one scene is his backstory, where you see what goes on with him and his father and Matthew McConaughey's character, and I didn't feel anything for him. He never seemed that interesting to me. He was very brooding, but he never got that. There was a couple moments where he was a little more lighthearted, but overall, he was a very bland character. The person with the most character is probably the young boy, who's the main focal point of the movie, because you do get to see him break down at one point in the movie, and you see him go through a lot of emotions through the course of the movie, and while it wasn't fantastic, it probably was a little bit better than the other two leads, even though none of them were especially great, in my opinion. The ending of this movie, oh my goodness, I did not like the ending of this movie at all, because it sets up this, I'm not going to say a sequel or anything like that, but it kind of just goes to an end. Like, you have all these things happen throughout this movie, and they don't feel like they ever get tied up. There's never like a resolution to what happened. Like, I'm not going to go too much into spoilers, but in the very beginning of the movie, the main character, the boy, his father, you find out his father died, and it seems like that's going to be an important part of the story moving forward, and it doesn't ever really flesh out that way. It never really seems important. You get a flash of him at one point, but it felt like that was going to be really integral, like a really integral part of the story, and it doesn't get there, and I think they're insinuating that Idris Elba's character is going to be like his father figure, and I never felt that through the movie. I never felt like he was a father figure. They even have like a little thing towards the end where you see like a family and a father, and I feel like that's supposed to be them saying, oh, well, now, he's his father, but I didn't see that. I didn't see that at all, and I don't think that chemistry was really there throughout the whole movie between Idris Elba and the little boy. And at the end, if I'm going to rate this movie, I'll probably only give it a 4.5 out of 5. It's not as terrible as some people are making out to be. It's not the worst movie of the year. It's not even an especially terrible movie. It's just not good. It's bad. It's not good. I wouldn't even say it's okay. It's slightly below average. But I think that has a lot to do with the clunky dialogue and the lack of development of this world that seems really interesting. That's the one thing that kept me in the movie, is that the world did seem somewhat interesting, and I did want to find out this lore, and there's a lot of mystery, and there's also a couple little kickbacks to the other Stephen King movies that you might catch throughout the movie, and I thought those were kind of cool. There's some things about this movie I liked, and I felt like it could have been a lot more, but it just didn't ever get there for me. It just felt like the hour-and-a-half runtime hurt it, even though I didn't want this movie to be any longer. But I think if you would have had a 2-hour runtime, 2-hour and 15-minute runtime, you could have fleshed out this world, this huge expansive world of multiple worlds that are taking place at the same time, and these characters that think they might have an interesting story somewhere in there. I'm sure the books have it. But this, they just felt, they were throwaway characters. They didn't feel like they even needed to be in the movie for the most part. Also, I remember hearing somewhere that they were talking about making a Dark Tower TV show, and while I didn't like this movie, and I really didn't like this movie, I think a TV show would work for this concept. I liked the world. It did feel like a show that you could see on CW or Sci-Fi, which could be successful, and I would watch it. Honestly, if this became a television show, I'd watch it, because I think that it does have some interesting qualities about it, and the world is kind of cool, but just this movie, the lack of budget, the seeming lack of work that went into the screenplay and the characters, and even kind of a little bit of miscasting, just didn't work, and it just fell flat. Well, guys, thanks for watching again. I think tomorrow I'll be going to see Detroit, so hopefully I'm going to come back now. I saw the Emoji Movie, and then I saw this movie. So I'm seeing Detroit tomorrow, and probably a ghost story on Saturday, so I'm really excited for that. Make sure you stay tuned for those reviews, and thanks for watching. If you saw this movie, what did you think about it, and what is your favorite Stephen King movie/TV show? Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and see you next time.